This is Zachlog the Great, and I am here today with my friend Louis.
Bonjour.
And we are joined also by a, among other things, a audiobook narrator for Castalio Books, Jeremy.
It's my pleasure and privilege to be here.
And we are getting together today to talk about Ben Jonson's poem, On My First Sonne. I will be reading that for us in just a moment. Before I do, quick reminder, if you like my work, you like what I do, you want to help support the channel, you can go to subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. The link is in the will be in the show description, and I appreciate all of that. And let's see, let's get this poem up here. There we go. Let me know when you guys see that.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. On My First Sonne by Ben Jonson. Farewell, thou child of my right hand, and joy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. 7 years thou wert lent to me, and I thee pay, exacted by thy fate on the just day. Oh, could I lose all father now, for why will man lament the state he should envy? To have so soon scaped worlds and flesh's rage, and if no other misery, yet age. Rest in soft peace, and asked, say, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry, for whose sake henceforth all his vows be such as what he loves may never like too much.
Beautiful.
Okay. So, as this is your first time, Jeremy, would you like to lead off with your thoughts on this poem?
Please.
Sure. I found it hard to kind of get a grip of it in a sense, and I think partly it's because it's a very restrained poem, and I think we're used to dealing with a subject like the loss of a child and being perhaps a little bit more overtly emotional about it. And I think one of the interesting things about this poem is that it kind of presents a sort of Christian stoicism almost to the events that have happened to Ben Jonson, and part of that's to do with the poem itself. It's sort of regular rhyming couplets, and there's that sense of kind of formal sort of regularity and restraint about it. But I think also it's the way he deals with the grief. It is and deals with the loss. It is a very restrained and very deeply Christian perspective, which I think a modern reader might kind of struggle a little bit to get their heads around. And in fact, when I've seen other commentators kind of look at this poem, I think they struggle a little bit to take it at face value, and they're looking for a way in that kind of says, well, Jonson is being a little bit cynical, or a little bit, he's trying to make sense of something. I don't see that. I think he has already made sense of it. When you get to this poem, there's no sense at all of him, struggling with what's happened. He's kind of accepted it, and he has he has a hope that he will see his son again. And you know, the as I said, that there's kind of a deep sort of Christian perspective on this that is actually quite challenging, actually, as somebody who's a Christian in the 21st century. I'm looking at sort of Ben Jonson's sort of approach to quite, obviously a devastating event, and he is remarkably clear about what's happened, and his take on it, his perspective on it, is one that I can only admire, to be honest.
It's yeah, I don't think our age, our culture is not one of stoicism and emotional self-control, and I think that is a weakness of ours, and it's hard to look back at people who see things differently. It's been a while. I do have this right here, and I need to I'll need to pull that up and read through that again sometime before too long. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. That's as I understand it, that's kind of one of the critical texts of Stoicism, as a philosophy. So, but it's what is one thing that's kind of catches me in the very first line, and a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know this, but this is something that I like fiddling around sometimes. A child of my right hand, which that is son of my right hand is the literal original meaning of the name Benjamin, and so I'm guessing his son his oldest son was named after him.
Yeah.
And so, child of my right hand he's spelling out the meaning of his son's name.
I did not know that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. And so, what else? But yeah, it's it is very calm and measured, which as much as you would call me that, as a performer, that's not my strong suit. I'm not I don't do like calm and restrained well. I have more fun being loud and bombastic. Just watch what is it? Chesterton's Lepanto.
One of my favorite poems, that is.
Yes, I recorded that one also. I need to re-record it. I need to brush up on it and re-record it, because when I did it the first time, I couldn't get through the whole thing in one take, and so I did several and stitched them together, and then I realized a little later, oh wait, my lips are getting out of sync in the latter parts, because I didn't know some things about video editing that I do now.
Tech trouble.
So I'd like to re-record that and have that look a little better. But but anyway, restrained. Yes. And it is very restrained and careful. At the same time, I mean, he's obviously in pain.
Yeah, he is.
Yes.
And I think the restraint is part of the power. There's no point where you think this guy doesn't care. That's never in doubt. Okay, so when he says, "Farewell, thou child of my right hand, and joy," and you're perfectly right about the meaning of Benjamin. It does literally mean son of my right hand. But the implications there, and as we know, the right hand was the favored hand, so the right hand was associated with kind of good fortune and blessing and what have you, as opposed to the left hand. So there's all that kind of stuff going in there as well. But he ends that line with "and joy. It's very clear that he loved his child, he loved his son, and he, this is not something that he's not just shrugging this off, but at the same time, he is dealing with his grief and dealing with the loss in a very restrained way, and his faith gives him a philosophical framework to do that, and that's really what we see being played out in the rest of the poem. And it's interesting that he says, my sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. He doesn't say too much love, he says too much hope. In other words, he had plans for his son's future. He had hopes for him, and what have you, and those hopes were never going to be fulfilled, and in his mind, that's his sin, in inverted commas. But it's, again, he calls him a loved boy. So he's laying it out here in a very clear way, and I think this is one of the problems for a modern audience. Okay, it's funny, we were talking before we started recording, weren't we, about this meme you'd seen about the growing up in the 70s and 80s, and the world that you were prepared for no longer exists. The world you were educated to be in, the world you were culturally kind of inculcated in, to expect a certain future and what have you, no longer exists. And it occurred to me, actually, that, I was born in 1970, so I sort of grew up in the 1970s and 80s, and it occurred to me that the age that I grew up in is actually, and this is going to sound, it's a little bit of an exaggeration maybe, but it feels like it's closer to Ben Jonson's era than the one we're living in now. There's been a real sharp dividing line, particularly in relation to this topic, which is the topic of grief. Now, I come from the UK, so I'm kind of, yeah, there you go. it's a great meme. Yeah.
I love the towers in the background. It kind of displays on the whole era of, okay, this is what's back then, as opposed to right now. So you hit the nail right on the head there, that things change, and as change goes, we must adapt as well. And you're right. You and I are both children of a bygone era, and it seems to me that eras are coming fast and thick. So
it does. I was going to say, I think in relation to kind of public displays of grief and how we cope with grief, a big turning point in the UK is the death of Princess Diana. Okay, so that just becomes a massive thing where you have very public kind of outpourings of grief for a public figure that, okay, she did some good things, and she certainly had a connection with the general public, but Britain used to be there's the whole stiff upper lip and kind of keeping your emotions in check and that kind of thing, and well, that changed at that moment, and it seems like since then we live in a world where sort of it is perfectly okay to express your emotions however you see fit, and the notion that it would maybe be good for you to restrain your emotions somewhat, and perhaps exert some intellectual control of your emotions, that has kind of, that's gone. So we're all sort of letting it all hang out, as it were. And I think what that means is when you come across a poem like that, if you're not careful, if you read it carelessly, you kind of think to yourself, Jonson's being a bit cold here, but he isn't. There is emotion here. It's just controlled, and as I said before, there's a kind of Christian philosophy that is guiding him and giving him hope and giving him a way of dealing with this very difficult situation.
Yeah, and it's also the thing that, like, what was, I forget where I picked this up, and it's one of those things that sounds fascinating, but I kind of wonder about it. But there was a thing a while ago that, what is it? People who got Botox, like the that kind of, I don't know if it's surgery, injection, that smooths wrinkles. People who got that reported a decreased ability to feel strong emotions. And the some people talking about this said the idea was that when you're happy, you smile, and your face does this, and this, and then your body gives you feedback. Your brain notices you're smiling and says, "Oh, I'm happy," and it kind of feeds on itself. And then if you don't, but if you can't, if some of those things are like somewhat deadened, like you don't do the full thing and you don't feel everything, which is kind of an interesting link between your body and your mind, and which is why I'm part of the reason I'm very suspicious about like these. What's the show? Altered Carbon, where like people switch bodies. Yeah. But anyway. But where I was going with that was like, how you express your emotions, kind of changes. It's not you have a feeling and you put it out and that's the end of it. It's what you do with it, how you choose to express it, changes your emotional state itself. Yes. And people, when the idea was like, okay, you're in pain, you still have some degree of respect, some degree of responsibility to everyone around you. Yeah. And that changed how people express themselves, and also helped them help them like accommodate themselves a lot more quickly than, oh, you're in pain, you have grief or sorrow, and just blast it all out into the world. Well, then that starts up that can start up that kind of feedback loop, and you have more, and it continues and can grow on itself. Yeah. Which is not, I don't think especially healthy. No. But what was there was one point in here which I found kind of interesting and painful. What is it? To have so soon escaped worlds and flesh's rage. Okay, and he says, you're beyond the reach of the world. You're beyond the reach of the temptations of the flesh. And the thing in there, which I kind of felt was a little bit twisting the knife. That's in Christian doctrine. There's these three sources of temptation. There's these three dangers. There's the world, the flesh, and the devil. Yeah. And he says, to have so soon escaped worlds and flesh's rage. But we don't know about the third one. He doesn't say that. And like, if you put it in that context, like it kind of sounds like he's scared for, the eternal fate of his son as well, which, I mean, thinking about that, that's also kind of horrifying.
Possible. It's a possible interpretation. I have another take on it, if you would permit me, that his whole avenue of stating this is less of twisting the knife and more a statement of comfort, even maybe to others who are reading the poem who have also lost children. Because let's be honest, we live in a flawed world. We live in a world that has fallen, and it's imperfect, it's painful, it's difficult, and he escaped it. And for one so young and also so innocent to escape the world so quickly, I would think that someone that young stands a much better spiritual chance, from a purely spiritual perspective, would have a better chance of eternal life than possibly even you or I, because we've had a lot more chances, so to speak, whether by decision or omission or what have you. So it's possible, you're right. It's possible that it could be an avenue of worry, but I've seen it as more a balm, a soothing, an ointment to soothe the wound, so to speak, of the passage of so young a beloved child. And quite frankly, that's honestly how it struck me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think it's interesting because I must admit, when maybe not the first time I read it, maybe the second or third time, that whole world and flesh being together did make me think of World, Flesh and the Devil, which will have been a kind of a current thing at around the time that I have a feeling that actual form of words first comes into a prayer book during Henry VIII's reign, I think. Actually,
really,
world, the flesh and the devil. I think that's right. So Jonson. It will have been around as a kind of a litany or part of an English prayer book for a few decades at that point. So he will have been aware of it. Like Louis, I kind of see it as a more positive thing, simply for a couple of reasons. Well, actually, no, for three reasons. Actually, firstly, that the second line, the line after it, and if no other misery yet age, is still presenting this as a kind of a positive thing. So to have so soon scaped worlds and flesh is raged, and if no other misery yet age. The second thing is that God himself is not, or nor Christ are specifically referenced in the poem. It's very clear that he's writing from a Christian philosophical perspective. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, he doesn't mention either Christ or God the Father specifically. So it seems to me he's keeping his focus specifically on down here, if you see it that way. The third thing is, yeah, exactly. The third thing is, are you aware of the dream or the vision that he had about his son? Okay, right. So basically, his son passed away. His son died of.
Go back a second. We lost you for just a minute. For just a second.
Oh, okay. Right.
So you said the vision that he had about his son.
Yes. So basically, Jonson was out of London when his son died. His son died of the plague at the age of 7, and Jonson wasn't there when he passed away. According to a conversation that he had with a few years later with a Scottish poet called William Drummond, basically Jonson went on this kind of walking holiday in Scotland, and he stayed with a Scottish poet called William Drummond for a couple of days, and they talked and what have you, and Drummond recorded some of the conversations and what have you, and you can still read those recollections today. But apparently, Jonson told William Drummond that he had a vision of his son who appeared to him in a dream, and he appeared to him naked and with a bloody cross on his head, on his forehead, just here. And he kind of saw it as a sign that something bad had happened, because the son in his vision was distressed. The interesting thing about it was that he appeared to him, according to William Drummond, as a man of a manly shape. In other words, as a man rather than a boy, because that the belief at the time was that that is how they will, a boy or a child would appear at the resurrection. They would appear in their maturity rather than as a child, which is kind of an interesting thing. So he had this kind of vision that his child, something had happened to his child, and of course, the guy that he was staying with at the time kind of calmed him down and said, "Don't worry about it. It's just nothing. It'll be fine." And of course, a couple of days later, they got news that the child was in fact dead. What's interesting about the vision is it has the hope of the resurrection kind of built into it. It's kind of the implication is because the child has appeared to him as a man, that that sense of I will see him again and he'll look a bit like this because it'll be on the resurrection, kind of is there in his thinking, and I think it does inform the poetry as well. So when he talks about escaped walls and flesh is raging, if no other misery yet age, that yet age is actually quite poignant when you think about it, because he's had this vision of his son as a young man rather than a young boy. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's also just, to me, like, reading this and trying to think about like how I would feel in a similar situation, and I'm a parent, and like if one of my kids were to die at a young age, it's hard.
That's
It's
a
one of those
horrifying thought.
Well, and it's one of those things that it's hard even to like actually process. It's hard to actually figure out what that would look like. Like it's a thing where I logically know it's a possibility, but the idea doesn't actually make sense to me. If that makes sense. And it's and it's also another thing about this poem. Obviously I do this channel, I do these poems, and I write my own ideas and, kind of broadcast them out into the world to whoever wants to see them. I like words, and I think I'm better than average at expressing myself with words. And yet at the same time, when I or someone I know is in one of these circumstances, when when a few years ago when my mother died, suddenly, unexpectedly, like I get really frustrated because, like like I said, I like words. I invest myself a lot in them. At the same time, at moments like that, I'm like, the words do not do the job I need them to do right now.
Yeah.
And then, unless, and this is why I like this poem and part of why I chose to record it, you find someone who managed to do something like this. Because he, other people have felt almost exactly the same thing he did. Other people have dealt with the same kind of pain, and he got the words right. He managed to get those ones, and
if it makes you feel any better, there have been many scientific studies, and you can even find them on the New England Journal of Medicine, where under emotional duress, whether it be anger, happiness, joy, sadness, sorrow, fear, especially fear, the IQ will drop of the human being. So I don't care if you're a Nobel Prize winning physicist, English will become your second language if you are scared enough. And
yeah. And having someone who was in that place and dealing with that kind of pain or that kind of fear or whatever, and managed to get the words right anyway, that's immensely valuable.
That's talent right there.
Well, and you know, and that's also, you know, part of why I want to share these, so that, you know, I've been in a couple places where this poem or that poem helps me get through, like, okay, what just happened to me? And you know, I call this to mind. I'm like, oh, he's saying what I'm feeling far better. It's better than I'd be able to say it myself, but that is it. And now I have a way to think about it. Now I have a handle on this. And I think that is the value in a lot of these things.
Yeah, I think one of the most impressive things about this poem is he doesn't express despair, nor does he ask the obvious questions of God, which is, you know, why has this happened, and you know, those are questions that I think all of us would have in a situation like that. But for him, these questions have been, if not exactly resolved, he you know, that there is perhaps, you know, in his heart or in his imagination the assurance that they will be, and I think that does come through. And I think what you end up with instead, rather than focusing on the tragedy itself, although obviously what's happened absolutely, you know, informs what he's saying, he focuses on his feelings for his son. And I thought the line, "Here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry," is incredibly powerful. That there's, you know, here is, you know, Jonson's a successful poet and playwright, and he's had a very rich and colourful and interesting life at this point. But for him, his son is the most important work, if you want to call it that, that he's produced. And I think, again, there's, I don't want to put too much weight on what is ultimately just a single line of poetry, but there's something in this for the current generation. I think we've become so consumed with this notion that our riches are to do with material things and possessions, and or with status and you know, how people view us and what have you. And actually, you know, our children and you know, they are our prize possession. They are our best work, if you see what I mean. And I just thought that was very powerful, and there is something quite not only moving, but again, I personally, I found this poem very challenging to read, because it challenges assumptions that we kind of take on automatically just by living in 21st century, you know, Western societies. We take on, you know, almost without really thinking about it, you know, and we have to, this is one of the reasons why poetry like this is so valuable, because it makes us challenge, it makes us question those assumptions about what's really important, and what's you know, how we view our lives, and how we view our children, how we view the notion of heritage and inheritance and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it does do that. It does it very, very powerfully, but as I said at the very start, in a very, very kind of restrained way, which makes it all the more powerful. You know.
Well, and it's also, it's hard to imagine a lot of, you know, well-known authors or artists today saying that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Almost
like it's like and you think about, you know, you know, a lot of cases you hear about their relations with their family, their relations with their kids, and it's a disaster. And it's like, you know, whatever else you built, there's this person That's, you know,
Yeah.
and that should be, you know, that should be the, you know,
The legacy.
that should be the biggest thing, the most important thing you did, and yet, you know, you treat them like they barely matter. And like you know, he's been in the news recently for other things, but like, you know, Alec Baldwin, a few years ago, there was this leaked phone call of him. There was a recording of a phone call of him just absolutely trashing his daughter over the phone.
Ooh.
And she was like 11 or something at the time, and he called her a pig, and I forget what else. And it's just like, uh, what else are you doing that matters more than an entire life ahead of this person? And it actually reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if either of you are readers of Jim Butcher's Dresden Files.
It's been a while.
I wish I had, actually, but I've not. No.
It's I won't say it's, you know, perfect, but I think there's a lot of good stuff there. And there's a moment in one of the recent books. Well, relative anyway, but where, you know, the one character, like, they're part of this. They're taking part in this, you know, heist that will, you know, net them millions of dollars possibly. And he's not someone who would ordinarily be in this kind of thing, and how he ended up there is, you know, long, complicated thing. But, you know, and you know, they're talking about, you know, okay, well, what are you going to do with this? And you know, they kind of get to him, and he just looks around and he says, I have a family. I am rich beyond measure. And like most of the other, you know, people there who are, you know,
Career criminals
and monsters of some variety just kind of stare at him, because like, this doesn't even make any sense to them. And it's actually, I'm going to give a tiny spoiler here, but you know, one of the other characters actually ends up, you know, as part of this job they're on, killing his own daughter, and that's part of the plan.
Ooh.
And and you know, the idea that, you know, what else are you going to get that matters as much as this? Like, that just, and you know, Ben Jonson, I mean, he's someone, when he was a contemporary of Shakespeare, roughly, right?
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're talking about him. We're talking about his writing 400 years later, which not a lot of, there's a very small number of people who are still getting, you know, their writing talked about 400 years later. And yet he says, you know what? This boy who just died, that was my best piece of poetry. That is the most important work of my life. All this other stuff is trash.
If anything else, it's an important lesson for modern day, which could do with reminding family is important. Children are one of the most important things you will do in your lifetime. And Jeremy, I want to thank you very much for bringing up that line about his best piece of poetry, because that I had to stop and read that twice because that hit me so hard. And I would also like to reference the 7 years thou wert lent to me. So he's acknowledging, okay, this is a child that was gifted to me. It's technically not even mine. It's on loan from God, a gift, a beautiful child. And even though they've been recalled, it was still something terribly important to me, something wonderful.
There's a number. I was just going to say that there's a number of words in the poem that kind of really stand out, and the one of them for me is in line 4, and it's the word just, on the just day, and this is this is a man who is prepared to acknowledge that no matter what his personal grief might be and his devastation at losing his child, nevertheless, the day in which that child was taken from him is just. And that's a very hard thing for a 21st century reader to get their heads around. It's that's his worldview, that the God he worships is just. He may not understand absolutely everything that has happened and taken place, but 7 years thou wert lent to me, and I thee pay, exacted by thy fate on the just day. And I just thought that was really quite powerful. And again, sorry, go on.
I had actually assumed, and maybe I was reading that wrong. He said, 7 years thou wert lent to me. On the just day, I had assumed that was that his son had died on his birthday, and so the just day is. I could be entirely wrong on that. That was just how I was pulling that. And so on the just day is okay. It's 7 years, and 7 years is up. That's the time. I could be entirely wrong on that.
I don't know that I've got the actual date of his son's birth or death, to be honest. So I couldn't comment on that. I got to be honest with you. When I saw that word just, that's how I interpret it straight away. All I've got here is that he died in 1603. So, and Jonson would have been 31 at the time, maybe 30, something along those lines. So yeah, I possibly so. I don't know, but that's how I kind of read it to begin with. There is ambiguity about that whole "Here doth lie Ben Jonson" as well, because obviously Ben is his son's name. Is he kind of saying,
Well, I think that it's Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry. And I kind of think that was because I remember seeing this, seeing people talk about this elsewhere, where for the possessive in English is apostrophe S. And I think for a while people had come to the conclusion that that was a kind of actually a kind of contraction.
Yeah.
And so some people tried like spelling it back out. And so Ben Jonson's but it's, I mean, in a good poem, there's more than one thing going on at any given point, and that might be both. Ben Jonson's best piece of poetry, and also, in a way, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his son, and here doth lie Ben Jonson, part of me died here as well. So yeah there's several ways of taking that part.
Mm-hmm.
Also, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna comment on the whole dying to self kind of thing, burying a piece of yourself with someone so dear, because when someone who's so close to you, someone you have such great affection for, passes away, it feels like a chunk of you goes with them. There's even a medical term, I forget what it's called, but there is actually a medical term for someone who dies of grief, because there's some psychological aspect that weakens the actual heart muscles. And I wish that I could remember what it's called, but that might have something to do with it. A weakness, feeling like something is leaving you as someone who you care for is now gone.
I think the dying of grief is Padme syndrome is the name for it.
Padme syndrome. I Star Wars references aside,
sorry, I was still stuck in the 17th century there, so I completely missed that reference.
I was trying to sell it. I was trying to sell it straight, so it appears I succeeded for a little bit at least.
Well played, sir. Well played.
You did, yeah, you did. I just want to say, by the way, that outside of the original trilogy, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars film. So just
really
put that out there. Only because it's like Macbeth. Okay, so you know how it's going to end, and it's all about how you get there. And I think there's this wonderful sense of kind of doom-laden tragedy throughout the entire film. I love it. But anyway, that's beside the point.
But that's actually a very good point. That it is kind of like Macbeth. You know it's gonna happen. It's gonna get there.
Speaking, okay. So one more thing that off topic, which happens a lot here. What is it? Macbeth. If you ever want to look up an interesting movie, there's this movie, Scotland, PA.
Oh.
There is an actual town in Pennsylvania called Scotland, Pennsylvania. The movie is Scotland, PA, and it's Macbeth takes place in Scotland. Apparently, it's supposed to be bad luck to actually say Macbeth in a theater, so they said they call it the Scottish play.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
But so Scotland, PA is the story of Macbeth. Taking place in small town 1970s America, and instead of killing his king to take over as king, to take over the kingdom, Macbeth kills his boss to take over a small town diner, which he then turns into Macbeth's. And they have chicken Macbeths and a Macbeth, a big Macbeth. So it's a well, and the thing is, it's an amazingly really well done movie. Because like I've watched it a couple times, and on one time. Like it's instead of 3 witches, it's 3 really messed up hippies.
Ooh.
And
hippies can be really
And I watched it one time, and like it was kind of mostly a comedy. And then I watched it another time, and I kind of saw it as the tragedy. Yeah. And so it's. If you look it up sometime, it's really it's really well done. I think Christopher Walken is in it.
Oh well, so you've kind of sold me right there.
Same. If Walken's in it, we're gonna take a look.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think Lewis was trying to find something.
I'll stick it on the list.
I actually found it. It's called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It is apparently a combination of, according to the Cleveland Clinic Journal and the New England Journal of Medicine, it actually has triggers a surge of stress hormones and has the most pronounced effect on the elderly. So it actually exists. So I now know the name. It is a weird one called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. And it's a really long name, which means we don't truly understand it.
Well, this is dying of grief, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Well, right. It's the effects of grief and extreme grief, especially.
I've heard that married couples who have been together for 40 or 50 years, when one of them dies, it often kind of sets a timer. And within a year, the other one, is often dies as well. And I haven't been married that long. We're a little over 10 years. But I can totally see that because you know, it's just like, it would be like just a part of me just being gone. Like it would be, yeah, like how to keep going at that point doesn't even, make sense. But what was
we kind of got far afield there.
That happens.
But yes, I think we're talking about grief and loss of individuals, which kind of took us off on a tangent. But yes.
Well, and they and also, like, the very ending of this poem, as what he loves may never like too much, and it's like, again, that kind of pain is like, I can't do this again. I cannot go through this one more time. And kind of saying, maybe the only way not to do that is to kind of cut myself off, to step back, to not grow that attached. And like you see that as an expression of pain, and it's also like, it's not something, if we can do that, it's a bad idea. If you can do that, you are hurting yourself in a different way. Well, and it's actually kind of C.S. Lewis talks about this in one of his essays, and he says, like, you are going to, if you love anything outside of yourself, even the most trivial pursuit, you are going to be hurt. The world is going to is going to take something from you, and the only way to avoid that is to harden yourself, to close up your heart. But if you do that, you're just killing yourself in a different way.
That actually reminds me of a line from a movie, just on a quick tangent. Have any of y'all seen I think it was not The Princess Bride. Yeah, I think it was The Princess Bride. There was a character in there. He was a pirate, and they were talking about emotional subjects. At one point in time, he said that life is pain. Anyone who says otherwise is selling something. And even in a ridiculous fantasy story, that struck me. I was like, huh, what a deep and honestly really borderline messed up way to look at the world.
I think it's what was Jeremy Dahl will probably laugh. Jeremy will probably laugh at this a little bit. It's Jordan Peterson says I listened to him a good bit before Vox Day got a hold of him, like a dog on a rag doll.
I remember you saying that.
But he said that, like, pain is, you can take almost anything else in life and say it is illusory, or it doesn't matter, or it's not of consequence. But we can't do that with pain. We can't do that with suffering. If you are actually in pain, like, it's real and you know it, and there's no way you can avoid it. And so, I think that I think that's part of the same thing, that, like, that is going to be a part of life. And it
is what it is.
Well, and it's also what is it? And I actually kind of did a video where I mentioned this in a different context. Like, there's this condition, medical condition. It's CIPA, CIPA, congenital insensitivity to pain.
Oh.
And basically, there are people who are born without a normal ability to sense pain. And contrary to what a lot of people think when they first hear this is a crippling disability.
Yeah.
Because they can do very serious harm to themselves without being aware of it at all.
Yeah.
And, and emotional pain, can and should be, we have pain for a reason. It's a way of telling us, by the way, stop doing that, and B, something needs fixed.
Yeah.
And we have an emotional pain is something the same thing. You made a mistake, something went wrong, and we need to fix it. And anything we do, or most beyond like give me a second. In a very short period, for instance, like if your kid dies, for a little while, there's a lot of things you might do to deal with the pain, and to kind of get yourself through it. Not all of it is necessarily, the best plan, but that's understandable. But like beyond a short period, most things you do to try to circumvent that pain is kind of tear you up in themselves, kind of destroy you in a different way. And so that's, I feel like I was working up to something and I lost it.
Oh, that's all right.
Well, I think pain is something that, as you say, fulfills an important psychological and physical function. In terms of kind of training us to navigate the world. And as we've already talked about, the world is flawed. There is pain in the world because of sin, ultimately, and it kind of fulfills an important function in that regard. Jonson lost his daughter as well.
Oh
yes, I just noticed that while I was looking up something else about this, that he also has On My First Daughter, which
My first daughter, she's 6 months old. So he had a really, I mean, he spent time in prison. He was under threat of execution at one point for having killed a man in a duel. He didn't go to the executioner's block or the gallows or however it was that they got rid of you back then. But yeah, he had a very kind of interesting life, definitely.
Kind of a rough go of things. Jeepers.
Well, also, up until late 19th, early 20th century, like child mortality was a lot more. So like, you have, someone who had like, 6 kids and like, 3 of them died before adulthood. That would not have been a strange story at his time. Whereas today that would be a big deal. Anyway, I was actually just about to say I think I've said most of what I wanted to about this poem. Lewis, did you have any last thoughts here?
Just really quick, Jeremy, please forgive my ignorance, but how familiar are you with French?
Well, okay, I've got an O level in it, but
Okay.
when I did my A level, I did not do very well. So I have a rudimentary understanding of French.
That's fair enough. I kind of my level as well. The reason I ask is because early on in the poem he said something about his first son being his right hand, and that kind of, as we've been talking, it kind of struck me. Now wait a minute here.
Dieu est mon doigt. Is that what you're thinking of?
À droite and gauche.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So gauche being the left hand, being kind of improper, and à droite being correct, being the right way.
Yes, that's right.
And I wasn't sure how to make that, but to have Benjamin, the right hand, to be your à droite, or I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. But to be your right hand, that's all. That's kind of deep. I enjoyed that reference as well. So thank you for pointing that out, sir.
Yeah, no, there's a lot in this poem. It's deceptively simple. And as I think I said at the start, one of the things that I'm really glad we've had this discussion actually, because it's kind of opened things up for me quite a bit in terms of thinking about the poem. But it seems kind of almost too kind of, not neat's the wrong word, but it's very kind of self-contained, it's very self-restrained, and finding a way into it can be a bit tricky at times, I think. And I think I don't want to do the whole patting ourselves on the back too much, but I think we've done a reasonably good job of kind of getting beneath the surface of it a little bit. So I was very pleased with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you both for joining us today, and God be with you.
Amen.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.